In business or in life in general, we all have to negotiate time to time, either when you're buying a home or buying a business, or even just with your suppliers or vendors. But we don't get to win each time, but we should win if we know and practice these 13 negotiating skills that I'm about to tell you. Stay tuned and let's talk about it.
Welcome to the one and only Gas Station Business 101 podcast, where you can learn all the secrets about how to start and operate a gas station business successfully and make money. This podcast is brought to you by the good folks at CSB Academy Publishing Company. And now, here is your host, Shabbir Hossain.
Welcome to Gas Station Business 101 podcast. I'm Shabbir Hossain, and this is episode number 51. This is the show where we discuss how to start, run, and grow a gas station business successfully and make money. And I give you the inside look at many real-life case studies so you can take notes and apply that to your business and be successful in your own business. Now, in this episode, I will be talking about something very different than what I usually talk about as far as gas station businesses and whatnot. But today, I wanted to discuss the business negotiating skills and how we can win with those skills. So it is an important episode because it's based on a book that I wrote recently, and I don't know if I ever discussed that with you guys. The name of the book is How to Master 13 Negotiating Skills and Win in Business. I published this book a few months ago. It was a soft launch, so I don't think I discussed it. But it's been on the market for a few months, and it's doing fairly well. But this is not why I have this episode to talk about my book. Instead, I wanted to talk about those skills so you will understand and hopefully you will gather some of these skill sets and may be able to apply in business next time when you're negotiating either with a vendor or you're trying to buy a new business or a home. It always helps because I gathered all these knowledge over the years and I started writing them down, and I had a mentor that helped me learn some of these skills, and I've applied and tried many times, and I realized how valuable some of these skills are. So I decided that I need to share those with you today. So let's dive right in and let's get started. The first and most important lesson in when you're negotiating is never to show desperation. I'm sure all of you will agree, even if you are in a flea market, if you show the seller that you really need something that they're selling, then chances are that they will not negotiate with you as far as the price. If they're asking for $20 and you say, I love this thing and I really need this, can you give it to me for $10? Most likely they won't, because they see the need in your eyes and in your voice and in your tone. So it is a good idea not to show desperation. That is the very first, it's not a skill, it's a tip. It's the light bulb moment that you should understand. Never to show desperation when it comes to negotiation, especially in business. Secondly, there are some basic legworks that you need to do before each and every deal that you're about to negotiate. Even long before you go to the table and sit down, you need to collect some data by research and discovery ahead of time. And then you need to take some time and analyze those data and figure out what your game plan should be when you go to the table. I know this may sound confusing as far as what data are you going to be collecting. Well, I will be discussing these 13 skills, and you will understand what type of data you will need to collect to be able to use in those 13 skills. So, as I said, first thing is don't show desperation. And second is you need to collect some data. And when I say data, to give you a hint, some basic data about the person or the people or the group or the business you're about to negotiate with, who they are, how they operate, what type of strength they have, and whoever the person is coming to negotiate with you, if you can find some personal traits, some characteristics of that person, would always be helpful. And let me go through each skill and you will know what I'm talking about. Skill number 1 is people skill. One of the very first thing I learned while doing business and negotiating different deals with people, that how my behavior can affect the behavior of others, and the importance that this plays on people skill in negotiating with others. When I go into a negotiation, I need to be very careful about my own attitude and what comes across in my smile, in my voice tone, and the words I use. If I were to send the wrong physical signals to the other party, then it could be a very negative impact on the whole deal. So you see, your personal skills, your personal behavior, your personal attitude can reflect, which can alter the outcome of that negotiation that you're going for. So be very careful. As a negotiator, I find it very important to have a complete picture of how an individual will behave and know the best way to communicate with them. I have found that when evaluating a person's personality style, I need to consider the following 9 items. And here they are. Number 1, goals, emotions, judgments, influence, value to the business, overused tendencies, how they behave under pressure, their fears. Number 9, how they can increase their effectiveness. While I tend to use certain of those 9 attributes more than others because I'm more comfortable with some, I have realized that it is important to learn how to use all those 9 attributes in case they're needed. This is a very effective and important part of developing your negotiation skills. Now, if people with different personality styles interact, the experience can be either positive or negative. While a positive experience is good for everyone, I find it important to be prepared for any type of negative outcomes. So I'm ready to turn that negative outcome into a positive experience if I'm ready. Well, this way I can help the other party in the negotiation to have a good experience, and as well as have that situation lead into a better chance of closing a deal. So you see, people that come to your table can have different attributes in their personalities that are stronger than the other. So the stronger attributes will always stand out. For example, let's say the person that's coming to your table is an influencer, meaning they try to influence the deal. They're very effective and they come across very knowledgeable, and they are full of data, and it's like they are dominant in a way. So if you know that this is their personality trait, and if you are carrying the same type of personality, then most likely you two will clash. So in that case, if I knew ahead of time that this is how this person is, then I can tone myself down, not to a point that I'm accepting a defeat, but it's as a skill, I can tune myself, alter my personality to a degree that it won't clash. Hopefully I'm able to make some sense. Let's move on. Skill number 2 is listening skill. In this skill, it's pretty much self-explanatory. I'm sure you understand that in order for you to achieve a great deal, first, you need to be a good listener, because first you need to listen and find out what this other party wants. And a lot of people during this time, you will see that when they're interacting, that one would stop the other and start talking. In my theory, you need to let them talk first. You need to gather. Remember that collecting data, research data, This is where you gather data. First, you gather as much as you can beforehand, but during the meetings, this is when you can gather direct data because you're face to face with the person. So your goal would be to listen to them. Talk less, listen more. But remember, there are 3 types of listening, and you need to be aware of all 3. First is selective listening. And I'm sure jokingly, a lot of people have said to some people that you've heard, oh, he or she has a selective listening, meaning they only hear what they want to hear and they tune everything else out. Well, not a good skill when you're negotiating in a business. Selective skills, listening skills, is not what you need in when you're negotiating in business. Number 2 is responsive listening. This is a good one because when you respond to somebody's comment or when they're trying to tell you a story of some sort, if you respond, then you're letting the other party know that yes, you're still in the game, you're still listening, you're paying attention, so they feel important. So this is a very good type of skill, listening skill that you need to practice, which is responsive listening. And number 3 is a playback listening style. This is a good one that complements the responsive listening, because once they finish telling their story, in between when you responded and kept them engaged, once they're finished, you're playing back part of what you heard so they know you did pay attention. And now you pretty much memorized some of it. That's why you're playing it back to them. So it is a very good skill to have. But remember, when you're listening to these people that you're negotiating with, 3 things you need to remember. 1, know the direction. When they're talking, know which direction they're going to. So if you know that you're negotiating to buy a business and they're talking about their horses or whatever they do, or when they go fishing, you know that's the wrong direction. So if you can steer them towards the right direction and then let them start and tell you whatever they want to tell you. So know the direction and steer them to the right direction would be the first step. Second would be ask questions. When they're telling you the story, whatever that is, remember, as I said, you have to be responsive. So in order for you to be responsive, you need to either ask a question or reinforce something that they're saying. Here is the trick. When you're asking the question, if you know that they're moving away from the topic, ask a question that can bring them back to the topic. This way, you're achieving 2 different things. One is you're keeping them on the topic. Secondly, you are being responsive. Number 3, as I said, stay on the topic. So in step 2, if you're asking the right question, you can steer them back to the right topic. But in the event, some people are more talkative than others. If they move on off topic, don't pressure them back into the topic right away, because people have stories to tell and that makes them feel good that they have a good listener who's listening. So let them finish and then you can start asking questions to bring them back into the topic. This way you didn't break their heart, because when they wanted to tell you about their fishing trip, you didn't stop them and say, let's talk about business. No, don't do that. Let them enjoy that. Once they're done, compliment them, whatever you need to do to make them happy, and then bring them back into the topic. Skill number 3, develop a full plan before you go to negotiate. What is a full plan? Well, your full plan is whatever your goal is. What is your goal? What do you want out of this negotiation? Do you want to win a deal or negotiating a deal to buy a business? Are you negotiating with a vendor that you want a better rate on something? Whatever your goal is, make sure you know that in advance. And it's not just that simple that you just need to know your goal, because I'm sure 99.9% people that go into a negotiating table already knows what they want, but they don't plan. And this is where it differs, because you need to plan for what and how you will be negotiating and for what. So in that skill, there are 6 steps that I outlined. And that is what I call a great plan will have these 6 steps. Number 1 is use the data that you gathered from your research, either from the first meeting and previous to the meeting, whatever data you collected, you need to use those data. Number 2, identify your own goals and interests. See, the reason you will be needing those data because you will know your angle of approach. So that's why you will need those data. So just keep that in mind or write that down that you will need those data. Next is identify your goals and interest. What is your goal? To buy that business, right? What is your interest? Interest is to buy it at a low price. And maybe there are 3 or 4 other little agenda that you want to negotiate in between, where if they're financing, you want to get a great rate. If they're selling you the store and they're not selling you a small something that attached to the building, you want to make sure you include that in your negotiation. Whatever the case may be, know those interests, identify those interests and your goal. Number 3, identify their goals and interests. Well, since you can identify yours, now remember those research data that you collected about them before you met them and after you met them. Now, this is the time where the data comes into play. You need to identify what is their goal and what are their interests. This way, if you can use those data and identify what they really want, how motivated they are they suffering from negative cash flow? See, remember this, and I will bring up a small example about a deal that I negotiated last year for somebody, where after doing some research, I knew the seller was suffering badly from negative cash flow, means they were flat broke. So going into the table, I knew that it's a leverage from me, but I can't tell them up front, hey, you're broke, so I can only offer you this and you better take it. Not a good idea. Instead, I made the deal sound very juicy, very profitable, lucrative for them. But at the same time, even though we decided on a fixed price before going into the table, I even reduced that price by another 15% because I knew when I write down that figure in numbers in front of them in a big piece of paper, they will look at it and say, man, I need that money. I need that money really bad. Even though it's much less than what we want, but I can use that money. And I was able to make that deal even with a lower, which is I reduced it by another 15%, and we did get the deal. So you see, your research can come in very handy for you if you can gather the right data. And then if you can identify their interest and their goals. Number 4, valuation of the deal. Well, value, of course, there is a monetary value of something. Let's say the business cost $1 million or asking $1 million. So that's a monetary value. But what is the value of that business to you? And what is the value of that business to them? If that person has only one business and they're selling that business, then the value of that business to them is infinite. It's huge because that's the only thing they have. Now, on the other hand, if they have 10 businesses and this is one they're selling, and in other way, you're buying the first business. So this is the only thing you will have. Then the value of that business to you is infinite. And for them, well, it's 1 out of 10. So you see, you need to identify the valuation of these deals, because if the similar way that you gather data about them, if they know anything about how to make a deal, they most likely have done the same research and collected the same data about you. So you don't need to come across that you're desperate, that this is the only thing you have. That's when you need to figure out a way to bring up that you're looking at 3 other very potential options. So if this one doesn't go through, you have 3 others lined up and 2 of them are very lucrative. So again, you need to know the value of that deal. Number 5, know how much to compromise. In this step, you need to do exactly what I said on the heading, which is how much to compromise. You need to know that. How much room you have as far as compromising. What will you compromise and what you will not compromise as far as the deal goes. There are a lot of components to a deal. For example, I'm going to bring up a gas station example that you're buying a business for a certain amount of dollar, and then you're negotiating on how much to pay for the cost of inventory, and then who's going to take over the insurance or the property taxes, and how many percentage of the retail value we'll be paying for the inventory. And a lot of times when we negotiate, this is where we have to compromise a lot of times. A lot of times I offer, hey, I will take 30% off of the retail price of all inventory. And then the seller says, no, it needs to be 25. So in this type of situation, you need to know how much you will compromise. Number 6, know how low you will go. Well, it ties to that compromise part. For example, I will bring up the same example where I ask for 30% off the retail price of the inventory, but I know I'm asking too much already. So in my mind, I know I will go down to 26, even 25 if I have to, if the deal is really good, but not below 25. But I'm asking 30. So you need to know how low you will go to accept their offer. See, I already in my mind, I know how low I will go. So these are the things you don't have to decide it on the fly. You need to decide before you go to negotiate about this. This way, you will not lose focus, or more importantly, not lose money. Now, next is skill number 4. Know what you want. Well, the quote, I'm going to quote somebody here that says, knowing what you want is also knowing how much you're willing to give up to get it. And that's what it is exactly. If you know what you want, in this case, you want this business, you want to buy this business, then how much are you willing to give up for it? You need to know that ahead of time. You know exactly what you want, but how much will you give for it? You mean the value. And a value can mean different things to different people. For example, a business that you're looking at, they're asking $1 million. And to you, it's your survival because once you buy the business, your family can survive on that income. But now on the other hand, if a company, a multi-billion-dollar company or $1 million company that already has 100 stores, if they're looking at the same business, they will look at it differently than what you would. So they may negotiate differently than you do. And it can be positive or negative for you. So just because you want it bad doesn't mean you need to give more for that business. Absolutely not. Because when you are a willing buyer and you have the means to buy a business, there are many businesses out there. Always remember, there is not just one business that you're looking at. There are many. See, it's hard to find a buyer than a seller. Every business is for sale. Pretty much. You may disagree with me right now because it doesn't have a for sale sign in front of it. But if you offer enough money, anything and everything in this world is for sale. Remember that. So always remember, you are at a better advantage point as a buyer than the seller. So if you are going into a table to negotiate with somebody as a buyer, you're already starting at an upper hand. But don't show that attitude, but just remember that. Number 5 on that skill list is knowing what they want. And I know we briefly talked about it before, but just like what you know what you want, you need to analyze and research and figure out what they want. How big are they? What is their motivation? How badly are they hurting? Are they hurting at all? Or is it just a business deal for them? That if it doesn't happen, they will still be okay. Or if it happens, then it's good. On the other hand, what if this business deal happens and they get to survive? And if it doesn't happen, if the sale doesn't go through, they will be out of money and they will suffer. See, these are the things you need to know ahead of time. As I said, if you're going into this as a buyer, then you pretty much have an upper hand. But what if you're going into it as a seller? And the buyer knows that they're coming into it on an upper hand, with an upper hand. Then you need to show as a seller that you also have an upper hand because you're not in any hurry or any stress or any distress, financially or otherwise, to sell this business so you can survive. Don't do that. In a storytelling way, maybe you can tell them that, yeah, I would like to sell it, but I'm making good money. So if I don't, I have other plans. I will improve this or that, and I will make it even bigger and make it my number one store. So there are ways you can gain an upper hand, but it's always good to know what they want and what you want. Let me briefly touch on the 4 steps to knowing what they want. Number 1 is identify their interest. What is their interest? Is their interest is to sell and get out and get the money because they're suffering financially, or they just want to make their business lean and more manageable and whatnot? So you need to find their interest. What is their interest? Number 2, identify their walkaway limit. Very important step. What would break the camel's back? What would get them away from the table? Is there something that can break the deal? You need to know or find out what is that limit. Number 3, identify who's the decision maker in their company, because there may be more than one. You need to find out who's the head so you know who to negotiate and what his or her strength and weaknesses are. Remember those research data? This is where it comes in handy, because you need to know who's the ultimate decision maker and know their strength and weaknesses so you can manipulate in a good way, not in a bad way, your skills to negotiate a deal as long as you know the person's weaknesses and strength. And number 4, the last one, is identify their strength and weaknesses. What I just finished telling you, which is once you know who's the decision maker, who makes the decision, then you need to find out what their weaknesses and strengths are. This way, as I said, you will be at a better position to negotiate. Skill number 6, knowing when to walk away. Well, there are times you have to walk away from a deal, because remember, as we were talking earlier, is what is their breaking point? What would make you lose that deal? What will break the camel's back? In this case, you need to know what will break your back at the same time. What will cause you not to sign that deal? What is the breaking point? I'm sure most of us already know, hey, if the price is such and such, I'm not going to buy it. But that's the one aspect of breaking point of a deal. There may be other breaking points of a deal. They may agree on your price, but they may take away something else. So know the breaking point from all aspects of the deal, not just the price. Either you're the buyer or the seller, know all aspects of the breaking point. As I said, not just the price. There is something called BATNA. It's an acronym for Best Alternatives to a Negotiated Agreement. Never reveal your BATNA or your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. You never want to let the other party know what your BATNA is. And on that note, I need to talk about the 3 steps to establishing your own BATNA, which is BATNA. Number 1 would be know your price range. Of course, if you're going into a deal, I'm sure you have a range in the pricing department that, hey, I will pay from here to there and not anything above. But well, if I can pay even lower than that, I will take it, but I will not exceed certain amount. So as long as you know the range, you're doing good on the first step. Second step is know their price range. Well, it's easy to say, hard to do. I understand that. But they have asking price. You, with all those research data and with some previous businesses that they may have sold, you need to do enough research to find out what could be or what would be their price range. How low would they go as a seller? Or as a buyer, how high would they go based on their previous experiences? If you can find out that they bought other businesses or they sold other businesses, then you can find those numbers. And in the event you can, then you're pretty much completed the second step, which is know their price range. Number 3, know the deal breakers list. Well, there are certain things that are always deal breakers for any deals. Maybe you can make a list of those for yourself and for themselves. Write down a few items that may break the deal. So as long as you know those, you know not to touch those things, which would break the deal. See, this way, you will have a clearly established a zone of agreement. If you don't get an offer within that acceptable range, then offer your BATNA, and if that doesn't work, simply you can walk away. And you'll be surprised how you will feel after walking away from this type of deals. Because I'm sure when you know that you walked away only after knowing that there was nothing else you could have done to save that deal and to save your dignity, you will feel better. But our goal is not to walk away from a deal. But there are times we have to. Let's move on. Number 7 on that list is know how much to compromise. Well, every deal is a compromise. Even when we first got married, I told my wife that marriage is a compromise. It's compromise how? Because let's say you're living alone and all of a sudden you get married, then you're sharing that space that you live in with your wife, right? So what are you doing? You're compromising your space so you can share, right? Similarly, I mean, compromise doesn't, the reason I brought up the marriage to show you, to make you understand the compromise, the word compromise always is seen as a negative thing, but it usually is not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. You compromise to get something better, but it always is good to know how much to compromise. Let's say, on a funny note, you get married and your new wife comes into your house and says, only room you can stay is in the living room and rest of the house you're not allowed. Those are mine from now on. Now, that's a big compromise. And most likely it will not be acceptable, right? Well, that's on a funny note. But in reality, in business, this is where it can be a negative thing. So you need to know how much to compromise and what and how far you will compromise. Number 8 on that list is knowing the barrier. Well, every deal or every time you negotiate, of course, there are some barriers. You need to identify those barriers first. And I talked about 7 different common barriers that I came across. Number 1, of course, is language differences. Because there are times we live in a very diverse country and community. So not everybody speaks the same language. So there are times you will come across a buyer or a seller that may not be fluent in your language. And that can be a barrier, which is a language barrier. Number 2, cultural differences. Well, if that person, the new buyer or the seller, cannot speak your language, most likely they came from a different culture than where you came from. So there can be a cultural differences as well. And when you're negotiating, a lot of times some of these cultural barriers can be a big thing because there are things that are acceptable, let's say in US culture, may not be very acceptable in other cultures or may be looked upon as very bad in some cultures. Number 3, physical barriers. Number 4 is personal problems. There can be a lot of different personal issues that can reflect or affect, for that matter, a deal. Number 5, preconceived notions. For example, when selling a business or buying a business, if you know certain type of people have very hard negotiating skill and they tend to always lowball you and this and that, those are preconceived notion. You're generalizing an idea about certain type of people. And a lot of times, those are bad for your business because not everybody is the same. Everybody is different. So when you try to negotiate, don't have any preconceived notion because that can set some unnecessary barriers towards your goal where they would pretty much put an obstacle for you to reach that goal. So make sure not to have any preconceived notion. Number 6, reputation. Well, it explains itself, I'm sure. Number 7, exhaustion. Exhaustion can be a barrier as well. If you're too exhausted, you may not be able to listen and analyze anything because you're too exhausted. So it's just like preconceived notion. Things of such barriers, like personal barriers, preconceived notion, exhaustion, these are the things you need to self-analyze yourself and make sure you don't have any of these when you're going in to negotiate a huge deal that can make or break your financial life. So make sure you're clean and clear as far as this type of unnecessary obstacles. Number 9 on that list, knowing how to control your emotion. Well, it's very important. As I said, a lot of times the preconceived notion about people, about things, about business can overpower and overcome our emotion. And that's when, always remember, emotion can cloud your judgment. And if you're too emotional about something, let's say you have only one business you're selling and you're too emotionally attached to that business. So anybody, the seller or the buyer, comes in and says, well, it's a decent business, not that great. I will see if I can make a go of it if you give it to me for this price. And you're so emotionally attached to the business that you react with anger. And immediately the negotiation breaks down because your judgment was clouded by your emotion. So make sure, as I said, when you're trying to negotiate, these are the barriers that can cloud your judgment and keep you from reaching a amicable settlement of some sort or a great deal for that matter. So very important for you to clear up your emotion. See, always remember, the way you feel about something is not necessarily the way somebody else will feel about that thing or that person for that matter. It is your personal feeling, so keep it to yourself. And as I said, don't let it cloud your judgment. Moving on, 10 on that list. Using the time, which is also the clock, to your advantage. Using the clock to your advantage. What does that mean? You've heard many times on TV, on different places, there are advertisements that says, if you call in next 15 minutes, we'll include such and such for free. I'm sure all of us have heard many type of advertisements where they put some type of time limit for you to act. Like I said, call within such and such hour or minute or day and you will get such and such for free or extra or whatnot. That is called using the time to your advantage. When you're negotiating, if you can make them understand that if the deal happens by such and such date, then you may give this much because you will be moving on to something different the next month, so it will benefit you. And since it's going to benefit you, you want to share some of this benefit with the buyer or the seller that you're negotiating with. And that is kind of like an added bonus for them. They think of it, okay, so if I make the deal happen by such and such date, that means I get a little bit more than what I'm expecting. So they think they're winning. So it is, in a way, you're using the time or the clock to your advantage to make the deal happen within certain period of time. Number 11 on that list, finding mutual gain. Well, remember that thing where it says everybody wins? It's the buyer wins, the seller wins. It's mutual gain. It's reality. In reality, it is the win-win approach. And there are 5 basic principles of mutual gain when it comes to negotiating in a business. Number 1 would be identifying the mutual interest. What interest both parties? Let's say you have interest in something and they have interest in the same thing. So identifying those mutual interests would be number 1. Number 2, willingness to work together. Number 3, agreeing on some standards. Well, we don't go below this, or we don't do anything other than this type of standards. And as long as they agree to the same standards, then you're agreeing on some type of standards. Number 4, all options on the table. Number 5, build a relationship. Make a friend. When you're building a relationship, there are things you can overcome which you cannot overcome otherwise. Because we do more for a friend than for, say, when you're negotiating with somebody you hardly know. So build a friendship. This can take you a long way and make it much easier for you to close the deal. See, in this way, if you can make the other party understand that you have certain degree of standard and value that the other party shares with you, and then it's a mutual gain for both parties to make this deal happen, and that you both win at the end. As I said, it's a mutual gain, so everybody wins. If you can make the deal sound that way, where your friend is winning and you're winning, that is the best thing you can do for a deal like that. Moving on. Number 12 on that list. Make them look good, let them brag. Well, remember what we just talked about, that it's a win-win situation. If you can create that, not every deal is a win-win situation, but if you can bond with them, if you can create a friendship with them, if you can make the deal sound like it's both parties win, then they know they won. And if they know they win, they will brag about it to their friends, to their colleagues, to their co-workers. Let them do that, because that makes the deal even better. That makes you look even better, because they will go and say, I dealt with Shabbir and I won. I pretty much got a very good deal. So in a sense, they're bragging, and I'm happy about it, because whoever is listening to that, they think, I need to go and deal or buy a business or sell a business to Shabbir because I think I can win also. So it is in a way advertisement for you. So your goal would be to let them win, or at least let them think that they won, and so they can go and brag about it. As I said, it can be the best advertising you can have for you and your business. Moving on to number 13, the last one. The last skill is the power of paper. Well, congratulations are in order, because if you reach number 13, that means you have made the deal happen. That's why you need the paper, because you need to write the closing documents. And my advice is always put things in writing. Whatever you discussed, whatever you agreed on, whatever you did not agree on, write it all down. Make the purchase agreement where you wrote everything down that you both agreed on and didn't agree on. And then sign it. Make it official. Make it a valid document. Because always remember, after you guys negotiate, you walk away and you say, I'll prepare the document and send it to you. Next thing you know, 2 days later, they say, I did not agree to that. But if you're sitting down while negotiating, if you write them all down and say, look, see if you said this, and I said this. So we agreed on this 7 or this 9 or this 12 agendas, and we did not agree on this 2. So I didn't write them down. So do we agree on this? If they say yes, sign it. That way it becomes official. So that is what I call the power of paper. Also, there are 3 other things you can do. One is like following up. Once you negotiated, made the deal, wrote it down, then you can send an email or a letter that says, it was nice dealing with you, this and that, and, congratulate them on winning or making the deal happen, whatever way. So it is a way to communicate after sales, pretty much like after sales service. So you're pretty much following up on whatever you guys discussed. And you can also send a summary of what you guys agreed on. Send like a summary of deal. And third, number 3 would be the most important one, is once everything has been agreed, have your attorney draw up the purchase agreement, and then make sure you both sign it. Once you signed it, it's a deal that you secured. Set up the closing date, move on to closing, make that money. So that was the episode for today. And hopefully, I know I jumped through a lot of these steps because we have to fit everything in about 50 minutes. And it's a vast topic. I could have covered it in 2 different episodes, 7 and 6. 6 skills on one episode, 7 skills on the other. But I've decided that we have so many more episodes and so many more topics to cover. I didn't want to break it down into two because I figured that I'm giving you the summary of all these 13 skill sets. And any of you need to know more, you can look at my book or ask me about a specific skill and I can email that to you, that specific chapter, and I won't charge you for it. But if you need to read the whole thing, you can look at my book and see or learn more. But I think I've given you pretty much the summary of it and explained it to you. So I'm sure that you can figure out how this 13 skill set can work for you. If you have any questions regarding this episode or any other episodes, or if you need to send me a suggestion for a next topic for a next episode, feel free to email me at Shabbir, Shabbir, at gasstationbusiness101.com. Or you can go to my Facebook and post your comments or questions there as well. And to get to my Facebook, you can write my whole name, .net, which is shabbirhossain.net. This is a domain redirect that will take you directly to my Facebook group. And as I said, if you want to see this book that I took all these 13 skill sets from that I wrote on Amazon or anywhere else, the name of the book is How to Master 13 Negotiating Skills and Win in Business. If you go to my website, the show note will have a link of this book on Amazon. You can find this book on iTunes and a lot of other retailers as well, including Barnes & Noble, but online, not in their store. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. And as I said, I found somebody who's transferring my email service from one server to the other. I'm not sure why she's taken so long, but hopefully it will be done soon and you guys will start receiving those emails again. Lastly, I'm working on a very important episode, which hopefully I will air in the next episode. And this episode, it will be all about how to build a gas station from ground and up, step-by-step process. And I'm not sure yet if it's going to be covered under one episode or it may take 2 episodes. But I want to thank somebody. A gentleman named Shahnawaz is the one who gave me this idea. He even sent me a detailed step-by-step process that I need to cover. So a big thank you goes to Shahnawaz for giving me this idea. And I have built a couple of them so far in last many years. So I still remember some of those steps and I will go through them with you. So any of you are ever in the process of building a gas station, that episode will come very handy. But if you don't want to build one, still you will enjoy knowing how the whole system works. So that will be a great episode. Thank you once again for joining me. And if you are kind enough, you can go on to iTunes and leave me a review on this episode or this podcast series. I really will appreciate you. Thank you, and I will see you in the next episode.
This has been the one and only Gas Station Business 101 podcast with your host, Shabbir Hossain. This podcast was brought to you by CSB Academy Publishing Company. Be sure to join us next time as we share with you the secrets about how to start and operate a gas station business successfully and make money.